Diamond B Sports presents the American Sports Cavalcade. A panorama of speed, color, drama, and excitement. The American Sports Cavalcade.
Just a few miles from New York and a few miles from Massachusetts lies Northwest Connecticut, some of the most beautiful and expensive real estate in all the Northeast. Classic New England homes and farms, an unlikely place for a sports car course. But 30 years ago, Lime Rock Park was paved among these gently rolling hills. And today from Lime Rock, we bring you coverage of the Sports Car Club of America's Formula Atlantic Series. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Evans.
And I'm Brock Yates.
And he took me just a minute ago for a ride around Lime Rock in the snappy Turbo Mercure XR4 Ti. And Yates, with that kind of driving, maybe you ought to renew your competition license.
A little old for that, Steve. But, you know, Lime Rock is a real favorite with all the race drivers around the United States. It seems a whole lot longer than its mile and a half. There's something happening all the way around this little racetrack. And believe me, what we did was fairly tame stuff compared to what we'll see with the Formula Atlantics today.
Well, instead of just talking about it, let's have a look. We just happened to take a camera along.
Well, Steve, like I said, this is one of the most action-packed 1.53 miles you'll find anywhere. Lime Rock Park, kind of uphill and downhill, really more like a short track, a stock car track, than it is a road course in many, many ways. And believe me, it was a whole lot of fun to jump back into this Mercure and kind of return to racing here at Lime Rock, especially with you as the navigator.
Okay, Brock, here we are going down the main straightaway just past the pit area. Cars are going to reach the terminal speed about here and then start really getting on the binders for turn one. They'll break
about 160 miles an hour for the, and then into this big sweeper. They call it the Big Bend. Now, it's a 180-degree right-hander, but more than that, it's a decreasing radius, so it tightens up as you get through it. A lot of kind of hairy driving coming through here, believe me.
Okay, and coming up, Brock, is the S's, and this is the only left-hand turn on the Lime Rock course.
Interesting. And a lot of spectator area in here, a lot of spin-outs, a lot of kind of just really wailing through here. Now, back out onto the no-name back straightaway.
That's right. That's what they call this little area right here is a no-name straight. And it heads up towards the most exhilarating turn on this racetrack.
It sure does.
The
Gotta get on the brakes a little bit, and then into this corner and up the hill.
This is the climbing turn, and as we crest the hill, the car wants to fly and break loose the rear tires.
Sure does. I get on the brakes a little bit here, and into this sweeping right-hander, and down the hill, you start back down. Now, this is a hairiest part of the racetrack, very fast, and you really start accelerating down here.
They call this the diving turn for real good reason.
Oh, yeah. Got out onto the straightaway, 160 miles an hour straight ahead, the start-finish line to complete the lap.
Well, the Lincoln Mercury Public Relations Department heaved a giant sigh of relief as Brock and I bought their Mercure XR Ti back unscathed. Well, we might have over-revved it a couple of times.
Nothing that they can't repair with a complete engine rebuild. But in the meantime, we've got 22 of these really quick Formula Atlantic cars lined up on the main straightaway here and getting ready for a start. On the pole, Michael Greenfield from Manhasset, New York. A fine young driver with a great future, a man who came up through these ranks and has, believe it or not, his father back in the field a little bit farther, teaming up with him.
And alongside Michael is Calvin Fish, who makes this an international field. He's from Norwich, England, and has a lot of Formula 3 experience, Brock, which will come in mighty handy today. Not that much difference in the cars.
And speaking of international, starting third, Scott Goodyear, one of the really rising stars in international competition. Started in go-karts and really tearing them up in Atlantic.
On the outside of row 2 is Steve Shelton from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's a Ferrari dealer, Brock, and earlier this year we saw him in an IMSA GTP car. But this is home for him. He's been racing Atlantic since the 70s.
Starting inside row 3 is Peter Greenfield, the 43-year-old father of the man on the pole, Mike Greenfield. Now, this man is a real veteran of all kinds of racing, not only Formula Atlantic, but the Can-Am competition as well. He'll be tough to beat in this class.
Another veteran outside of row 3, John Lloyd from Chicago. He's driven Formula Ford, Sports 2000s, IMSA GT cars. Also, a lot of experience at the age of 30.
You talk about racing experience. How about Chris Clark? He's 33 years old. He's running motocross competition, go-karts, hydroplane, Formula Ford in Atlantic. He's been in about anything with wheels and a hull on it as well, Steve.
And just the reverse is Russell Newman from Bartlett, Illinois. He's 43 years of age, but didn't start racing, road racing that is, until about 4 years ago.
And Steve, here's a familiar name, Paul Dallenbach, the 18-year-old son of the Indy great Wally Dallenbach and the brother of Wally Dallenbach Jr., the current Trans Am champion.
Outside of row number 5, that is car number 94, driven by John Timken Jr. of Old Saybrook, Connecticut. He's been around Formula Atlantic for about 10 years and has a lot of wins to his credit. 22 cars in all are on the grid, and we're just a few minutes away from the start of this Formula Atlantic competition at Lime Rock Park in Connecticut. Stay with us.
About ready for a start here at Lime Rock. 1.53-mile track, 100 miles as the starter gets ready to wave them up. What is that exactly, Steve?
Where do they get these guys? If NASCAR's Harold Kinder saw this, he'd throw his flags away. You just see him out there doing a dance.
Michael Greenfield on the pole, Calvin Fish beside him. Scott Goodyear, no relation to the Tart family, in third, and veteran Steve Shelton rounds out the top 4.
And Brock, Formula Atlantic is famous for their tire-smoking standing starts like Formula One cars. Well, due to scheduling difficulties here at Lime Rock and the length of this race, this is further than they usually go, it'll be a good old flying start.
I'll tell you what, Steve, it'll be a flying race. They like to call these things the modern American sprint cars. And believe me, the way these little rats perform on a short course like this, these guys will drive them flat out for the whole distance. There's going to be no cruising here today, I'll guarantee you.
And you really don't sit in one of these cars. You wear it like a suit. The car just formed around the driver. And they're dangerous automobiles, or potentially can be. Any open-wheel race car is. You don't see many of the drivers scrubbing up their tires like so often happens on a pace lap. That's because the rules require them to run the tires they qualified with. So these have already seen some action. Earlier, Brock and I had a chance to get around the pits and talk to these drivers about this brand of competition.
I'm with the man who's starting on the pole today, Mike Greenfield, who I understand is coming off a one-race winning streak here at Lime Rock and Atlantic Cars. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's right. I won my opening e-car event here back in '85. The rest of the year hasn't been so well, though, but we've had some problems, and we're starting to pick up. Things are happening for us, and I expect to do well here.
Well, this is a long one, 100 miles. Is it a race? I know you guys are just about as hard a collection of drivers that I've ever run across. You sprint these cars awful hard. Will you drive the car? Will the brakes hold up for 100 miles, for example, on Lime Rock, or will you have to back it out a little bit in the middle of the race?
Well, this is my first 100-mile race. I'm not sure what to expect, although I did encounter some problems last year with my left front tire. Lime Rock is extremely hard on the left side of the car, being as all right corners just about. I'm just going to try and get out in front and put some distance on them and set a good pace for myself.
Make them chase you. Well, good luck. I hope it works for you, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. And now let's go to Steve with a second-place starter.
Thank you, Brock. Starting on the outside of the front row will be Calvin Fish. And Calvin, who's going to be first into turn 1?
Well, obviously starting from the front row makes a big difference, and it's a rolling start, whereas we normally run the standing start in Formula Atlantic, so it's going to be a tough decision to say who's going to be first there, but I intend to be, but I'm sure there's like 25 other guys saying the same thing.
Brock and I took a lap earlier today. That climbing turn is really something. How does it affect your kind of race car?
It's not too bad. We've got plenty of downforce with the Formula Atlantic. We have good tires from Goodyear, and you know, it's not a big problem. You just have to make sure you're concentrating really hard, and you know, it's no problem at all.
Okay, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Brock, back to you.
Steve, I'm with Scott Goodyear, who will start third in this race and is really one of the top young prospects, not only in the United States, but from his native country in Canada. And Scott, is this the first time here at Lime Rock?
Essentially, Brock. I was here in 1980 with a Formula Ford for a day, and coming here with Atlantic car is a whole new experience, so I'm really learning the track.
It's a plenty serious race car, and they're pretty well suited here. It's almost like, you know, having driven here a little bit myself, it's almost like a like a short track, almost like an asphalt track run the wrong way, other than that one left-hander. So you really set the car up for a whole bunch of right-hand corners, I would imagine.
You essentially do, and you have to get used to it yourself. And we're running 100 miles here today, which is 65 laps, so you're seeing everybody run around here with straps from their shoulder to their helmet, and that might be a key factor, I think, endurance as this race continues.
A lot of people are saying that you are the man to watch, and a lot of people are saying maybe you'll take an early shot at down the inside to try for the lead early, or will you sit back knowing that you've got a long way to go?
I think it all depends on the speed at the start and a bunch of circumstances. It's crossed my mind we may do that. I think we put a new motor in last night, and we're just as fast as the pole sitter now. We've straightened some things up, so we're going to be there either at the beginning or at the end or what have you, so we'll fix it.
Well, we're looking forward to watching you run. Good luck, Scott.
Thank you, Brock.
Okay, and now let's go to Steve with a fourth-place starter.
Okay, Brock, I'm with Steve Shelton. He'll be starting in the 4th position outside of the 2nd row. And, Steve, this is a longer race than you guys generally run. What problems does that create for you?
Well, you know, the basic thing is you need to keep the car on the highway, and I've done some endurance racing, and I know what it takes to be there at the end. So hopefully I can use some of those experiences to bring into play today.
Do you have to pace the tires at all at this distance?
Yeah, we're hoping, of course, all hoping that it's going to be dry today, and I think this track is pretty abrasive as tracks go, and it's going to take a 10-tenths effort, and I don't know how you baby the tires, but certainly when you can be easy on them, we certainly do that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure.
So here they come, still on the pace lap as we watch this very rapid, very competitive field get ready to take a green flag.
You heard the drivers, Brock, talking about the predominantly right-hand turn circuit here. Some of these cars actually have stagger. In other words, the left side tires would be bigger in diameter than the right-hand side to force them to turn right.
And I'll tell you what, you think this isn't competitive? How about men like Danny Sullivan, Bobby Rahal, Gilles Villeneuve, Keke Rosberg, the former world champion, all came out of this kind of competition. This is tense stuff, believe me, about as good as it gets.
The pace car is off. Malcolm Labatt Simon, the official starter, waving the green flag, and we are off for 100 miles of Formula Atlantic competition, 3 abreast into the Big Bend.
Right, Scott Goodyear tried to put a move down on the inside, but it didn't quite work, and the leader is Calvin Fish coming off the first corner and through the S's. Right behind him, though, is Scott Goodyear. Behind him, Michael Greenfield, who got snookered off the pole and falls back to 3rd.
In the 4th spot, number 2, Steve Shelton. In 5th is Chris Clark, the number 5 car. As they head up towards the climbing turn, where the car does indeed want to fall away. The ground effects, however, come in very handy, particularly on this part of the course.
Right, as we watch Goodyear, right behind him is Michael Greenfield in the 2nd and 3rd spots. Fish pulling out a little bit as they head down the diving turn and onto the front straightaway. But here comes Goodyear. Diving down on the inside, he's going to try to outbrake Fish. He'll do it. He'll make it stick. A terrific pass into turn number 1. Remember, that's a decreasing radius right-hander, and Scott Goodyear has made a beautiful move through the S's now. Goodyear, Fish, Greenfield hanging on at 3rd, and Shelton beginning now to challenge Greenfield for that 3rd spot. Greenfield a little wobbly there as they head on down to the no-name straightaway.
Well, a lot has been written in motorsports journals recently about the young Scott Goodyear, Brock. He is probably Canada's finest hope for yet another world-class driver. Reading his biography, his list of credits in motorsports just go on and on, page after page.
Well, the Canadians have been waiting a long time for the successor to Gilles Villeneuve, one of the greatest of all time, who, as we said earlier, started in this kind of racing. Now, of course, the next young star to come out of Formula Atlantic is a man named Michael Andretti, Mario's son. This is where he got his start, really, after Super B. And we will say it again, this is one of the great training grounds for both Formula One and IndyCar competition. Every one of these guys out here is dreaming about a shot at the big time. There is the 5th and 6th place cars, Chris Clark and John Lloyd heading down the no-name straightaway. They've fallen back already just a little bit on the leaders. Up ahead of them, immediately in front of them, is Steve Shelton. Oh, here they go across the climbing turn and heading back down the hill. These race cars, very similar in theme to an Indianapolis car. Relatively narrow tires, some ground effects. Believe me, they are light and powerful. About 1,000 pounds, just over 1,000 pounds, 1,050, and engines that produce over 220 horsepower. So you talk about power to weight ratio, these rascals are really fiery little machines.
And they're also very sensitive cars, Brock. You don't dare lean on these too hard. You don't overdrive them. You can get in real trouble.
Good race here for the second spot. That's Calvin Fish, and right behind him is Michael Greenfield, who you remember started on the pole at over 115 miles an hour average speed, faltered on the start, and now is fighting his way back.
But up front, it's a number 14 car of Scott Goodyear, who took the lead on the very first lap in this 100-mile competition.
The Berkshire Mountains of northern Connecticut are dotted with beautiful small lakes. This one's called Lake Wanisquepomic. On its shore is the city of Lakeville. Why do they call it Lakeville? Because it sure is easier to pronounce than Wanisquepomic.
Yates, I'm glad you got to pronounce it. I don't think I could have, but I can pronounce Scott Goodyear, and he is leading in the SCCA Formula Atlantic competition at Lime Rock in the number 14 car. The best race out there right now is the second and third between Calvin Fish and Michael Greenfield, cars 49 and 50.
And young Paul Dallenbach upholding the family name by hanging on to 7th place right now.
Interesting, Brock, and the Formula Atlantic competition in this country is divided into two conferences. There are the E cars we're seeing today, E for East. Early this year from Riverside, we saw a great race with the W cars in the Western United States. There's the race for the 8th position. That is Russell Newman of the 51 car. John Temkin Jr., 94, just behind him a few car lengths.
And James Opperman bringing up the rear there of that group. You're absolutely right. They do run both east and west. The cars are the same. Driving caliber about the same. And every once in a while, these two western and eastern classes get together for some really great racing. As we watch Russell Newman still holding off 94 John Timken Jr. as they head down into turn number 1. A lot of passing going on in turn number 1. That's the end of the main straightaway, and a lot of passing by the nature of outbraking works in there. The rest of the racetrack, pretty difficult to pass on because these cars are so equally matched, Steve.
When we visited Lime Rock earlier this year, Brock, for the Trans Am Series, there was more passing done in turn number 1 than all the other turns on this racetrack combined. So, yes, indeed, that's the place to get it done. And, you know, we're going to show you a race back in the pack here. This is for the 20th position. Number 33, Greg Niddle, and number 72, Joe Ostrowski. But there is a race within a race. Up front are the advanced, aerodynamic, and ground effect cars. Well, back towards the rear, you'll find some of the older machines who are still competitive because of this class structure. Earlier, I had a chance to take a look at the inherent differences between a machine like Scott Goodyear is in and a car like, let's say, Craig Niddle is in. Ground effects technology has had a tremendous impact on the Formula Atlantic class in the past few years, particularly with the design of the new RALT automobiles. Let me show you what I mean. This is a spare side pod off of a RALT. The air enters here through this screen, comes up through a radiator, cooling that, and then flows over this contoured surface, providing downforce on the car. Equally as important, the underneath side of the pod, well, that's what they call a ground effects tunnel. Air flowing through there and sweeping upward produces a low pressure or a vacuum area. The two work together and the car really sticks to the racetrack. Now, this kind of technology would have obsoleted all the older Formula Atlantic cars all over the country, such as Greg Niddle's number 33 1978 March car. But the Sports Car Club of America, in its infinite wisdom, has produced a class within a class called Formula Atlantic Flat Bottom. Now, you can see in the pods of this older March car, there's absolutely nothing in there to produce any ground effects vacuum whatsoever. Plus, with the nose they're using on these cars, much like a sports car, all of the air is directed around the pods anyway. So for Greg and his like, they're out there racing for points and prize money in a separate class, just like the fast guys.
And a good thing it is, because otherwise these old race cars would just be relegated to the back of somebody's garage. But at this point, guys like Greg Niddle and Joe Ostrowski can have a good run for not a whole lot of money. And still, the race cars are excellent training grounds, excellent entry vehicles to move on into faster competition. So we've got the flat bottoms. Those guys are doing a good job out there right now and really staying out of the way of the leaders. The leaders, of course, being Scott Goodyear and Calvin Fish, and they are, even as we speak, beginning to overtake some of the slower flat-bottom cars as they sweep down the no-name straightaway. That yellow car, of course, Scott Goodyear, right behind him, and the white and blue car, Calvin Fish. A pair of visitors, as it were, from the great Commonwealth of England, Calvin Fish from England, and Scott Goodyear from just up across the border in Toronto, Canada.
Not only is Scott Goodyear a fine racing driver, but he's also also a terrific coach. In fact, he is the co-founder of the Canadian School of Motor Racing, and he's only 26 years of age.
Oh, boy, he's got a lot to teach, and believe me, a great future in wherever he chooses to go. Calvin Fish, also a fine young driver, has a lot of experience in European Formula 3 competition, which is really quite similar to these automobiles. These cars, of course, as we said, 150 pounds, all carry the same engines. Double overhead cam, Ford Cosworth PDA engine, 1,600 cc's. That's 91 cubic inches, all generating about 220 horsepower. Top speed, well over 150, perhaps 160 miles an hour on faster race courses.
Which is pretty incredible when you consider the engine block is basically that from an old Pinto.
It sure is. But boy, do they pump out some power, a lot of torque, terrific acceleration, and great maneuverability. Michael Greenfield still trying to regain that ground he lost immediately upon the start. But right now, he's fallen back, not gained ground, and is maybe 20 car lengths behind Calvin Fish back there in that third spot. But right now, Greenfield has moved up a little bit in the S's, implying that maybe Goodyear and Fish have a little more straightaway speed, but Greenfield perhaps a little bit more cornering power, because he has moved in a little bit as they head toward the that uphill corner on the back part of the racetrack.
Well, I'm sure Scott Goodyear is thrilled right now to be leading this race, Brock, because they stumbled just a little bit, to that team anyway, in qualifying. But he told you that he had that power back to the race. He sure does. In fact, in just 10 laps, the leaders are now putting a lap on the flat-bottom cars. In fact, there's Greg Snell, number 33, the man who was kind enough to hang his car upside down so we could look at the flat bottom on it.
And give you a good idea of how much quicker these new ground effects cars are. That Ralt of Scott Goodyear is now sweeping through turn 1 and moving up on some of the slower automobiles. Goodyear right behind him, Fish, weaving through slower traffic. Look at this. Fish moves in and challenges, and Goodyear almost got chopped as they sweep out of the S's and down the no-name straightaway. Good piece of driving by Calvin Fish and Scott Goodyear, who almost tangled there, Steve.
I tell you, that little maneuver by Goodyear, Brock, will give you some idea of how responsive these machines are. They're just like little darts out there.
They really are. Glued to the ground with those sophisticated tunnels on their side pods and excellent suspensions and just some fine young drivers behind their wheels.
Well, on the inside here, we see the third place runner. That's number 40, Michael Greenfield. And he better start pushing a little harder, Brock, because first and second out in front of him are getting away.
They sure are. Scott Goodyear leading it. Right behind him, the number 49 Ralt of Calvin Fish. Here they come, sweeping through the S's and starting to widen out on the field here at Lime Rock Park. The SCCA Formula Atlantic, 100 miles of action.
It's still wheel to wheel in Formula Atlantic racing here in Lime Rock. Leading number 14, Scott Goodyear. Just behind him, Englishman Calvin Fish in the 49 car. Number 40, Michael Greenfield in third, followed by Steve Shelton and Chris Clark. The second half of the top 10 looks like this. John Lloyd in sixth. Paul Dallenbach, the 98 car. John Timken Jr. in number 94. James Opperman in the 3 car. And 51, Russell Newman. I'm Steve Evans along with Brock Yates. And even the action back as far as 14th is close, Brock.
Well, Steve, things have not been going well for the Greenfield family. Peter Greenfield, remember, started 5th. Balked on the start, had problems, and has fallen way back. Now trying to work his way up in the number 41 green and blue Ralt of his as they come down the front straightaway. There he goes by the number 50 Ralt of Chicago and Tommy Grunna. So Peter Greenfield trying to make up that distance he lost early in the going.
One thing we're sure about Tommy Grunna, the white car, the second machine to your picture here, he's got more than enough endurance for a 100-mile race. He was an Olympic-caliber speed skater competing against the likes of Eric Heiden, a talented athlete.
And Steve, right behind him in the number 15 Ralt is Al Mitchell, a Texan who, like so many of these young drivers in Formula Atlantic, has come out of the Formula Ford ranks and the Sports 2000 ranks to move into this caliber of competition. We've seen an awful lot of guys. There's Tommy Grunna, as I say, from Chicago, a lot of experience and a lot of ambition, too. Tommy, a very talented young driver. These guys have worked around these light, overpowered, small sports cars to a point where they're then able to move up to Indy cars or, in some cases, Formula One, as the case was Keke Rosberg and Gilles Villeneuve.
Al Mitchell, the yellow number 15 car, currently in the 16th spot. He is a teammate to the leader, Scott Goodyear, and here comes Mitchell himself making a move on the outside. I don't think that's going to work. It was just a long way around.
Well, it was a good move, though, because had he been able to hold on to it, he would have had the inside line and that final right-hander leading out onto the no-name straight. But Tommy Grunna made it stick. Here come your leaders, Goodyear in the number 14 car and Calvin Fish, who just hasn't given an inch. And right behind them in the third spot in the number 40 green and blue roll is Michael Greenfield. So these three guys have been almost under a blanket from the start. And remember, Goodyear was the man who took advantage of that start to grab the lead.
You know, Brock, we've talked about the training qualities of these Formula Atlantic cars. You don't see it demonstrated that much here at Lime Rock. But on tighter courses, these cars have enough horsepower where a good driver can steer them a bit with the throttle. Some 230 horsepower you mentioned. How do you get 230 horsepower out of an engine that started out as a basic Ford Pinto block with just under 100 horsepower?
Right. These cars are very, very highly tuned. And you think, are they quick? How about 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, 0 to 120 miles an hour in just under 11 seconds? Those have been test times that have been done over the years on these race cars. So they're tiny, and they may not look all that powerful, but they are pocket rockets, believe me.
I'll agree with that. There's the race for the 8th position. James Opperman, the black number 3 car, and he's being chased by the number 94 car, John Temkin Jr. Earlier, I decided to try and discover just how they get over 230 horsepower out of a 4-cylinder Ford Pinto engine. Here's what I found. You can't pick up an automotive magazine these days without reading an advertisement for the latest 16-valve 4-cylinder sports car rocket ship from the Orient or Europe. Well, the Formula Atlantic cars we're seeing today also use 4-valve per cylinder engines. Now, this is one out of the number 3 car of James Opperman. It uses a 1600cc cast iron Ford block right out of a Ford Pinto. But the big difference is the 2-piece Cosworth overhead cam cylinder head. Now, here you can see in the cylinders, there really are, Virginia, 4 valves, 2 exhaust and 2 intakes. The advantages are you've got better distribution of the intake as the spark plug fires, and when the exhaust opens, you've got better evacuation of the exhaust gas. And also, if you had just 2 valves of equal area, you'd have to use great big valve springs that take horsepower to work and also create a lot of friction. Now, this bolts to the cylinder head, and this is the cam train. This is the top part of the head, and here you can see there are 2 dual overhead cams to actuate these valves. Now, this engine costs, ready to race, about $12,000, and that's not bad when you consider it makes 230 horsepower, and the original Ford Pinto made 90.
Right, Steve, and even at 225, 230 horsepower, they're very reliable engines. As you can see, we've had almost no retirements, even though these guys like Scott Goodyear in the number 14 car, and right behind him, Calvin Fish, have been going at it hammer and tongs for the entire race.
But so far, Scott Goodyear has not fallen prey to... Oh, and we've got a car off in Big Bend. That is James Opperman, the number 3 black car, and he is just doing a little off-roading out there, Brock, trying to get back in this before he loses too many positions.
Well, James Opperman in the off-racing hours is a scientist with one of the major pharmaceutical companies in the United States, and right now, though, he's trying to recover. And look at this, Steve. That is the 49 car, the white roll of Calvin Fish, challenging Goodyear in the Big Bend at the end of that straightaway where so much has been going on. Calvin Fish tried to dive underneath, outbrake Scott Goodyear, exactly the move that Goodyear put on Fish to take the lead to begin with.
Both these drivers have shown tremendous poise here today, Brock, because this competition between the two has been so intense. That's about the widest margin of lead that Goodyear has enjoyed.
Right. Scott Goodyear holding off Calvin Fish in that challenge as they head down the sweeping turn through that final 150-mile-an-hour corner and head on to the main straightaway here at Lime Rock Park.
And how about the progress being made by the number 41 car, the blue and green machine of Peter Greenfield? Last time we checked on him, he was 14th. Well, now he's 10th and trying to get around the 51 machine of Russell Newman.
Russell Newman trying to hold him off down toward the uphill corner here. Can he do it? Yes, he does. Newman nips Greenfield as they head over that blind hill. But Peter Greenfield definitely challenging and definitely on the move here. 43-year-old Russ Newman out of Bartlett, Illinois, one of the veterans in this Series teamed this year with Tommy Gruna out of the shops of Russell Olson in Illinois. And here's a challenge. Peter Greenfield moves down the front straightaway and takes Russ Newman to move up yet another spot.
A strong drive by the number 41 car, Peter Greenfield. He is up to the 9th position, and it's a good thing he's moving well because there's his son parked off in the grass. That is Michael Greenfield, the number 40 car. He was on the pole.
This is Lakeville, Connecticut, where they started to manufacture pocket knives way back in 1844. Business kind of slow right now, but I'll tell you what, just down the street, there's another little plant where they invented and built the little ball that they use in IBM electric typewriters. And I'll tell you what, a whole bunch of guys locally have gone racing based on that plant.
Well, keep the knives away from Craig Nittle because his number 33 car has just fallen out of this Formula Atlantic race. He started 20th. That's one of the flat-bottom cars. In fact, the machine we examined earlier. But he's taking his helmet off, Brock, so he'll be a spectator.
Well, Steve, we may have spoken too soon. We commented on the low attrition rate, but now suddenly some guys are retiring. Nittle and out on the racetrack, Mike Greenfield.
Well, Craig Nittle trying to relate to the crew exactly what happened to the car. Maybe they can prevent a reoccurrence of it the next race on down the road. And also in the pit area, this is the number 7 car of John Lloyd. He was running as high as 6th, appeared to be very competitive, and they are replacing at least one of the spark plugs. The spark plugs in these engines are located deep inside the head. You can see how far that wrench dropped in. There are hemispherical combustion chambers we showed you, and the spark plug is right in the center of that Hemi. Sitting in the car, John Lloyd, he hopes to get back in it. He personally has no idea what's wrong with that car, but I would guess it came in with a miss, and the first place you look, other than at the spark plug wires, is the spark plugs themselves. Well, also, a man who has to be very disappointed, the young man who sat on the pole in the number 40 car, is with Brock.
Oh, and Mike Greenfield, who started with such high hopes on the pole, and then all of a sudden it just kind of deteriorated. Mike, what finally put you out?
Well, I came out a big bend and my motor started breaking up and it just wouldn't pull any revs. So I just pulled it off the course before I did some real damage. Might be ignition.
It looked as if maybe you were down a little bit on power at the start. I know that the guys got a little bit of a jump on you, but then you couldn't seem to make it back up.
No, I'm not sure what happened there. Those guys just came up from behind me. I guess they got a better jump on it than I did.
But you was running all right until it started to really go away.
Yeah, the car was a bit ill-handling at first, you know, before we got some heat into the rubber. But then I started getting into the pace, and I was hanging in there with them. Traffic was a little tough at first, but I got through. They weren't putting too much distance on me.
Well, then you know your dad, he had a bobble on the first lap. Now he's worked his way back up, I think, to 8th place, so there's a little bit of hope left anyway.
Yeah, there's some hope. I hope he does well.
Well, we're cheering for him, too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, Brock, we're sorry to see Michael out, but a few guys who aren't too sorry is Scott Goodyear, who's leading it in the yellow number 14 car. Calvin Fish still second, as he has been for the majority of this race in the 49 car. And let's see, Peter Greenfield, indeed, has moved up to the 8th position in the 41 car.
Right, Steve. So Greenfield, one of the family at least, still in it. And notice, too, that Paul Dowlenbach has moved into the 5th spot. So that has to be his best showing so far in this very competitive league.
But what a race this has been for first and second. We have seen no lead changes between the two, but always Calvin Fish is right on the spoiler of Scott Goodyear, and now they're in traffic. That could help Fish.
Look at that traffic. As they went into the big bend, it looked more like a sprint car race than a road race, just a scramble of race cars as the number 49 white Rawl to Calvin Fish just hangs on the exhaust pipe of that yellow Rawl, the number 14 car of leader Scott Goodyear. And look at Goodyear nip past that lap car to retake the good line through that corner up ahead, not giving Calvin Fish an inch, really.
What a confident driver Goodyear is, Brock. He pulls right up behind, almost touches the car he's going to pass, trying to get as much draft as he can, then slingshots him and darts right back in. This man knows where he's going at all times.
Oh, this is some fine young driver. He has been tabbed by many, many experts as a young man with a great future, and came up the right way through Formula Ford and now into Atlantic, and I'm sure, as does Calvin Fish. We talked about him earlier, his experience on both continents, solid credentials. And we don't want to belabor the point, but I'll tell you what, if you want to become a major league race driver, this is the place to start. There's so many superstars that have come out of this sport. The list goes on. We talked about some of them: Ray Hall, Michael Andretti, Villeneuve, Rosberg, but there are others. Tom Gloy, Bryce Cobb, who's doing so well in IMSA competition, came out of this league. The list is endless, and I would imagine that among the stars of the future, one of them right there is Scott Goodyear in that number 14 yellow Rolls.
And here we see the leader shoot right by the number 7 car of John Lloyd. He was in the pits earlier. He's back out on the track, but still not running particularly well. You know, Brock, another thing about these cars that IMSA star Bob Earl was telling me is they teach you a lot about suspension because they have all the adjustments and all the refinements of a Formula 1, 2, 3, or an Indy car. So you really learn how to set up a race car and how it should feel. You've got the adjustments to make, to modify about any part of the automobile that's not working.
Absolutely. They're complete, big boy, all-star, senior-level race cars in every sense except perhaps the raw horsepower. But as we said earlier, other than the top speed, the cornering power, the general traction of these automobiles, considering their relatively narrow tires. And look at this. Calvin Fish challenges down the hill. Fish moving nose to nose with Scott Goodyear down the front straightaway. It's a drag race, but Scott Goodyear holds him off as they head toward the Big Bend. But will Fish try him on the outside? Not likely, but Calvin Fish definitely challenged coming down onto the front straight here at Lime Rock.
And that had to get Scott Goodyear's attention. The two of these guys have just been beating on each other all afternoon, but that is the first time that Calvin Fish has demonstrated maybe an ability to get around Scott.
Back at Lime Rock, where Scott Goodyear continues to lead against the intensifying challenge of Calvin Fish.
Also, Eric Lang, the number 60 car, and Peter Greenfield in 41 have swapped positions. Lang is now 8th, pushing Greenfield back to 9th. But the race right now is for the lead. Just before we went away, we saw Calvin Fish put some intense pressure on Scott Goodyear. But that young man from Canada doesn't crack under that.
He sure doesn't, Steve. He's moved out a little bit after what I would imagine was a real scare coming down off the hill. Let's see if that works one more time. This is the part on the racetrack here at Lime Rock where Fish challenged. Really the most difficult, the fastest, the most dangerous part of the track, coming down off that hill. But right now, Scott Goodyear holds on, and Fish has no opportunity really to pass as he tried before. But here comes that Big Bend corner where so much hard braking and passing is going on. Goodyear, though, holds the inside line, prevents Calvin Fish from making any kind of a move. Here they come through the S's, always on line, very disciplined drivers, both of them. And Calvin Fish really has no choice at this point other than to just sit back there and wait for Scott Goodyear to bobble.
Either that or for his car to go awry, his tires wear out, whatever. The picture we're seeing now could have been 10 or 15 laps ago because every lap looks just like the one preceding it.
Absolutely. Calvin Fish sitting there in the second spot. He, like every other driver in this race, is concerned about one tire. That would be the left front, which is taking a massive load here on this predominantly right-hand corner racetrack. Only one real left-hander here, which is kind of odd for a racetrack. Usually you see a road course almost equally matched between lefts and rights, but this racetrack puts a terrible toll on the left front tire of these Formula Atlantic cars, especially over a long distance that they're running today. Much longer, almost twice as far as they normally compete in.
And unlike a stock car, Brock, a driver in an open-wheel Formula Atlantic car, he can see that left front tire. If it starts to show bad wear, he knows it in the cockpit.
He sure does. And this is a race car. These kind of race cars are the type you don't want to push your luck with because you'll bounce one of these babies off the fence and hurt yourself.
Back in the 7th spot is number 27, Paul Natchway. Just behind him, the 60 car, the Blue Machine of Eric Lang is in 8th. And Peter Greenfield in 9th, the 41 car. He was moving up so well and now has fallen back to 9th, has got to get by Eric Lang and Paul Natchway if he hopes to improve in the overall standings.
Well, he really made a move toward the front and now seems to have faltered a little bit. And, of course, I'm sure the sight of his son, the man who sat on the pole, Michael Greenfield, in the pits has not done a whole lot for his morale either. So the Greenfield family encountering some difficulties here. And I'm sure at the beginning of this race, when they showed up here at Lime Rock for practice, they might have had some thoughts about a 1-2 finish. That doesn't seem possible now. In fact, it is impossible.
I'll tell you what, though, 41 Peter Greenfield, that's the green and blue machine, is now right back up with Lang again. He could get around him right here. As they come down into the Big Bend, that's the place to do it. And Peter Greenfield has moved back into that 8th position. And here come the leaders down into Big Bend. Calvin Fish on the inside, and what a brilliant move. He now leads for the first time today Scott Goodyear. And Proctor was a lap car who proved to be useful to Calvin Fish there.
I think they might have touched wheels there a little bit. Scott Goodyear got pushed way offline as Calvin Fish made a daring pass heading into the Big Bend and now has a long lead, a comparatively long lead as far as these kind of cars are, about 5 car lengths as they head out onto the back part of the racetrack. So Scott Goodyear, in a move that really wasn't of his own making, trying to get past a lap car, got a little offline, and Calvin Fish just struck like a snake and moved in to take the lead.
Some very alert driving on the part of Calvin Fish, who is now the second car in your picture there, the white machine. That is car number 49, and he's the leader. And don't you know, Goodyear wants that back. He may have to wait, though, till the next time in Big Bend.
Interesting move that these two guys just exactly exchanged places. And there is Paul Notchway. He is off the racetrack in the number 27 car in the Big Bend. Probably got overcooked it into the corner and is recovering and back underway.
And there's our leader, Calvin Fish, making that right turn, headed up towards the climbing turn and putting a little distance now on Scott Goodyear. This is the biggest lead that either of them have enjoyed throughout the contest. You have to wonder if maybe Scott Goodyear is not having some sort of a problem with that automobile. Brock is down in his pits to find out.
I'm with Colin Stewart, who's Scott Goodyear's crew chief, and a little bit of concern, I would imagine, Colin, because it appears that the engine's starting to miss a little bit.
Seems to be missing a little bit at the moment. We're not quite sure why. Maybe it's a spark plug or whatever, so we're just getting ready to do a rapid pit stop if he comes in, but it obviously hurt us very much in the race.
Yeah. Calvin seemed to be all over him pretty hard for a while. Maybe he was losing a little bit of power because Calvin seemed to be able to certainly almost get underneath him at the end of the straight here, but now that he's by, maybe we'll see how it works out. What do you think? Do you think he can get back up front?
It's quite possible. They're very, very closely matched in racing, so seems like one's up one day and one's up the next day. There's no telling between the two drivers.
Well, they're sure putting on a great show one way or the other.
They certainly are. Thanks, Colin. Thank you.
Well, as most of these crew chiefs do, Colin Stewart is keeping lap times on each and every circuit of Lime Rock. And unfortunately for that team, his watch is showing that yellow car of Scott Goodyear is slowing down. And here we can see the interval is a good deal wider now. Calvin Fish starting to stretch it out. And Scott Goodyear is starting to drive more aggressively, trying to make up for what may be a loss of power. When these engines start to miss, they seldom ever repair themselves.
Elegant country living at its absolute best up here in northwestern Connecticut and some of the most valuable real estate in the world. But very traditional. Not so traditional as what my pal Steve Evans has found in the pit area in Lime Rock.
As hard as our Diamond P remote crews work behind the scenes to bring you all the stories, it's important that we stay refreshed. And thanks to my new pal Steve Scott from New Hampshire, we have got an all-terrain motorized cooler this weekend. Get over here, Budfoot. All right, we got lots of stuff for after the races. Here we go. That'll cut the dust. Okay, Budfoot, head on down and see Brock Yates. I love it.
I tell you, Evans is on the leading edge of technology wherever we go. We got to remember to take that thing next time we go to Riverside, right, Steve?
I'm not sure anything will cut the dust at Riverside.
Well, right now, the guy who's cutting the mustard, as it were, at Lime Rock is Calvin Fish. He leads it. Up in 7th place, Peter Greenfield continues his move toward the front. Finally got past Eric Lang and Russell Newman, so let's watch out for Greenfield. He, in the number number 41, green and blue Ralt there, riding in the 7th spot, trying to recover, as we said earlier, from a first lap bobble that put him way at the back of the field.
But ever since then, Brock, he has straightened out his driving, the car handling very well, taking all the excellent lines to the turns. And this is a guy, he's in his mid-40s. He has no aspirations of going to the Indianapolis 500 or anywhere else. He's having a good time in this very series.
He sure is. And here comes the number 94 car of John Timken Jr. He's currently in the 6th spot and hoping to move up. John, a real veteran, been around this kind of racing for over a decade, has run both the Super V, the Formula V cars, the Formula Ford cars, so really used to running these small, highly powered open-wheel single-seaters.
Have you noticed, Brock, the cars are sliding a bit more, exiting the turns than they were before? Remember, these are the tires they've not only raced on all day, but they also qualified on, and everybody has the same compound rubber.
Right. These are spec tires. That's what really one of the keys to a successful formula. You see it in both short track stock car racing and also in some types of road racing, where you get one tire and everybody has to use the same compound. That really makes for even competition.
It does. You know, Brock, today we're putting the spotlight on the Formula Atlantic cars, but there's all kinds of racing action this weekend. It's an SCCA national event. Paul Dallenbach there has moved up to the 5th position in his beautiful red number 98 car. But what I was going to say, there's so many ways to get involved in road racing. There's some classes that you could go out for $1,000 or $1,200 and buy a little 4-cylinder stock car and compete and work your way up, maybe someday, to Formula Atlantic. If you're interested at all in Sports Car Club of America activities, be it as a volunteer worker at the races or possibly getting behind the wheel yourself, here's a number that you can call for all of that information. 1-800-255-5550. They'll send you all the membership information, and there's a lot of levels and areas in which you can get involved and have a lot of fun. Maybe meet us.
Yeah, boy, that's a real bonus. Just look for us. We'll be right near Budfoot, moving around through the pits as we go back to racing here. It might also be mentioned, Steve, that number 98 Red Roof Inns car is yet another car that was being fielded by the late, great Jim Truman, the man who Bobby Rahal drove to victory for at the Indianapolis 500. Truman, who just passed away, has helped so many young drivers get a start in this sport, and the legacy being carried on here now by Paul Dallenbach. As you said earlier, a member, the youngest member, 18 years old, of the great Dallenbach family, formerly of New Jersey, now Basalt, Colorado. Wally Sr., a great Indianapolis driver in his own right, moved on to the chief steward of the CART IndyCar Series. Wally Jr. started more in Trans Am cars, big sedans, and is the defending Trans Am champion. And now here comes Paul, moving up through the field. And remember also Robin McCall Dallenbach, also a star in the Kelly IMSA Stock Car Series. So a whole family of racers, believe me, from Colorado.
And in the white number 5 car, that is Chris Clark. He is in 4th position, about ready to lap the number 27 car of Paul Natchway. Natchway, even though he's being lapped, is in the 12th position. And, you know, I talked to Wally Dallenbach Sr., Brock, and he said the family sat down and said, what are we going to do about Paul's racing career? They looked at every series available and decided that this was the shortest route to the Brickyard, the Indy 500.
Well, I think it's a wise move. There are a number of different kinds of cars, open-wheel cars. There's the Super Vs, there's the American Racing Series, which are Buick-powered spec cars, and also the Formula Atlantic cars. All afford an opportunity to drive pretty high horsepower, sophisticated chassis that lead to an Indy-type kart racing automobile. But I think Wally was probably right. You got to respect his opinion. He is around the IndyCar field all year long, and he has to know that these Atlantic cars really work as training vehicles.
And one way to get involved in Atlantic racing very inexpensively is with one of the flat-bottom cars we talked about earlier. You can pick one of those up at a right price and get involved, and then maybe step up to the ground effects machines as you gain experience and your wallet gets a little bit fatter.
There's your 3rd place driver, Steve Shelton, in the number 2 car, coming out of the S's, and in the S's, off on the dirt, is the number 14 2nd place car of Scott Goodyear, Steve.
Scott's engine is still alive. He's trying to find a hole in traffic where he can drive up that bank and back out onto the racetrack. What he needs is a traffic cop right now. because he is losing more positions as he sits there. Goodyear, now he sees a hole. He ought to be able to, yes, there he goes. He will go back out of the racetrack in 6th position.
Well, I don't know whether it was a mechanical problem, whether a tire's gone away on him or what, but it was a fatal mistake as far as his opportunities to win here, because Calvin Fish has moved out to a big lead, and Scott Goodyear gets back underway, way back in the 6th spot here. A tough break for the young man from Canada.
Well, we know from Scott's pitch that he's got a minor engine problem. It appeared earlier that maybe he was just driving the car a good deal harder trying to make up for that, and of course there could be a problem with those tires.
So a tough break for this man, Scott Goodyear, but a good break for Steve Shelton, who now moves into the 2nd spot. Maybe not in a position right now to challenge Calvin Fish, but we're beginning to see more and more attrition, more and more tire wear come into play here at Lime Rock as this race unfolds. So it's far from finished. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Back at Lime Rock, where this man, Englishman Calvin Fish, leads it. Steve Shelton second, Chris Clark third, Paul Dallenbach up to 4th, John Timken Jr. rounding out the top 5. Scott Goodyear falls back to 6th. Peter Greenfield moves up to 7th. Eric Lang, Russell Newman, and Al Mitchell round out the top 10.
So there is our leader, the 49 car, the pretty white machine with the blue number on it. There are 29 laps left. And that man, Calvin Fish, is probably wishing this was the usual distance at which they raced, because he would already be on the victory rostrum spraying everybody with champagne. But not so here at Lime Rock. He's got well over 30 miles to go. And there's some question about fuel economy, not so much with a Calvin Fish, whose car is performing beautifully, but with maybe a car that's not getting as good a mileage as it should. It'd be very marginal as far as the fuel supply is concerned at this particular distance. Well, for Calvin Fish right now, he's able to maybe back off on all systems just a taste, conserve those tires for any sort of a challenge he may get later on. Right now, Brock is down in Calvin's pit with his crew chief, Dennis Eade.
The race car running fine. You're happy, huh?
That one is.
All right.
A little unhappy with the others, but that one's running just fine.
Well, if you want to be happy with one, that's where it ought to be, right?
It's the one to be happy with.
Dennis manages a couple of cars. In fact, there's several firms around the country that for a busy businessman who wants to race on the weekend, they'll take care of the car, make sure it's tuned up fine, even carry it to the racetrack for him. He can fly in and drive and do what he likes to do best. The race for 2nd place right now, the black car, that is Steve Shelton, number 2 from Florida, and right behind him comes number 5, Chris Clark, and Clark appears to be moving up a little bit.
Well, Steve, as we said earlier, Chris is all kinds of racing experience, everything from motocross to hydroplanes, but he's relatively new in Formula Atlantic, and this, if he gets up among the leaders, or stays among the leaders rather, this will be his best finish by far. So Chris Clark feeling very much in command of the situation, even though he's back in 3rd place, but his crew very satisfied so far with his performance.
Well, Chris can thank Scott Goodyear and Michael Greenfield for 2 of those positions, because they were strong runners that have already had problems and fallen back. In Greenfield's case, he is out of the race.
Well, as we said earlier, suspensions are very critical in these race cars. They're fully adjustable, just like the big guys in Formula 1 and kart. And if you've got the chassis working, you can really run on a racetrack like this. However, if the chassis settings start to go away for any reason, you're in deep trouble. Earlier, Steve had a chance to take a look at how sophisticated and how complex a chassis setup is on a Formula Atlantic car.
Brock, we both talk about chassis setup and about every form of motorsports we cover. Well, in Formula Atlantic racing, it's very sophisticated and also quite technical. And the teams will start by knowing the weight of the car. Not the total weight, but the weight at all 4 corners by placing scales, individual scales, under each tire and then monitoring the weight on this electronic box. For example, the right front weighs in at 206 pounds. For the fun of it, let's check the left rear. And that comes in at 386 pounds, and the total weight of this Formula Atlantic car is 1,104 pounds. Now, there's a number of very fine adjustments that can be made to the suspension, both fore and aft, and they're pretty similar on both ends of the car. But up front, you do have a steering adjustment, and this is for toe-in or toe-out of the front tires. Also here, you have a camber adjustment for the tilt of the front tires. And here, one of the most important adjustments on the car, and that's ride height. If the driver comes in and says the car is just not turning into the turns the way it should, the first thing the crew may do is lower the ride height at the front of the car to transfer more weight up front so he's got better steering control. And you can barely barely see under the suspension pickup, there are coil-over adjustable gas shock absorbers. Now here, and all important, is the sway bar. Now the lighter the bar you use, the more roll in the chassis. The heavier bar, the less roll. Now even if you get the perfect selection there, as far as the sway bar is concerned, as the tires start to wear and the fuel load becomes less, the car's handling changes. So the driver inside the cockpit can adjust the sway bar both front and rear.
As we said, big boy race cars, very sophisticated to tune and set up for a race. As we watch the battle for the 5th spot, that is Scott Goodyear back there in 6th, chasing the number 94 car of John Timken Jr.
Well, the way Scott performed early in the going, you'd think he'd be closing the gap between himself and Timken, but that is not the case, and no doubt due to that misfiring engine.
Right, Steve. He's well down on power and just not able to catch up anybody, including Timken. He's got to be very, very disappointed with the way this car is performing right now after an excellent start. It really held Calvin Fish off with good effect for most of the race, and then all of a sudden that the engine goes sour, that little spin of his, and he's just stuck back there behind John Timken Jr., who on the other hand is very, I'm sure, pleased with the 5th spot because his car didn't qualify quite as well, and he was well back in the field.
Now here's the race for 2nd place. The number 2 black car, that is Steve Shelton. He's in 2nd. The car just behind him, that is James Opperman. The number 3 car, he had some problems, has fallen down to 11, so he's a lap car, and he is between 2nd and 3rd. In the 3rd slot, well, that is Chris Clark, the number 5 car. Oh, look at this. James Opperman just blows right by Steve Shelton, and Shelton has got some problems, Brock. That's the only way that could have happened.
Oh, yeah. There goes Clark by. Shelton, as you can see, falling way off the pace. What a disappointment for Steve Shelton. Moved all the way up to 2nd place and now apparently in trouble as we watched Chris Clark there in the number 5 car go on to take over the 2nd spot.
Well, there was no smoke whatsoever out of the 2 cars. Steve Shelton, the car didn't make a move or misbehaved like maybe it broke something in the suspension. The tires have all got air in them, so who knows what happened to it.
Well, whatever it is, that has got to be a very disappointed young man, Steve Shelton, as he is limping into the pits right now. On the other hand, the victor in that little dust-up was this man, Chris Clark, moving on to what is sure to be his highest finish, presuming, of course, he doesn't encounter the kind of problem that has taken Goodyear, Greenfield, and now Shelton out of contention.
Well, this is Shelton. He is on the pit wall, and he just slings the steering wheel out in disgust. He just wants out of that car. His day is over.
Boy, he is hot, and you can understand why. You begin to feel as the race winds down that he got a chance for a good finish. Steve Shelton just walks away from the race car, leaving the crew to pick up the pieces.
With just 10 laps to go, more problems set in for the driver of number 14, Canadian Scott Goodyear. He is off the track down in the turn 1 or Big Bend area. Another driver had problems just before we went away. Steve Shelton. Brock's with him.
I'm with Steve Shelton. It has to be very frustrated after running a car up into 2nd place, and then all of a sudden now, what happened?
If it wasn't for bad luck, we wouldn't have any luck at all. We broke the same thing that we broke at Elkhart Lake, which is a timing device that connects to the crankshaft. And it's a new situation for these motors, and it doesn't look like it's going to work out too well, so twice a guinea pig.
2 times an out for the car. The car running all right otherwise?
Oh, it was running beautiful. It was a little lap traffic there I was having a problem with, but I was starting to get clear of them, and the car felt beautiful.
I know exactly how you feel when they're running good and all of a sudden they're out. There's no warning, and that's the worst time, really. Do you think he could run up on Fish? Did you think you had a shot at him?
I don't really know how far ahead he was. I last saw 8 seconds, but with that traffic out there, you know, there's no telling. I mean, it's anybody's race still.
Well, Steve, we're sorry it ended like this for you. Good race up to the point where it ended.
Thank you.
Well, you don't learn if you don't experiment, but it sounds like a particular part of that car will be in the trash can. With just a few laps to go, here's how it sets up. Leading is Englishman Calvin Fish, followed by Chris Clark. Paul Dallenbach moved up to 3rd. John Timken Jr. in 5th place is Peter Greenfield. He really had to battle from the very back of the pack. Eric Lang in the 6th spot, followed by Al Mitchell, Russell Newman, Paul Natchway, and James Opperman. He's in 10th. and I'm sure smiling to himself, even though he's in the second spot, is Chris Clark, the 33-year-old from Jensen Beach, Florida. And I'll tell you, that man has clutched many a checkered flag on victory laps. He won 40 races in go-karts, 24 events on 250cc motocross machines, and they'll bite you quick. He won 10 races in hydroplanes, has captured a couple of poles so far in his Formula Atlantic racing. And Brock right now is down in the pit area of the number 5 car to chat with his crew chief, who's got to be wearing a grin.
I'm Joe Stamola, crew chief on the Chris Clark car, sitting in second place right now, Joe, and you got to be pleased about that. What's he telling you?
Please, we've been a long time coming. This has been working slowly. Chris never sat in a race car before last year this time, so this has been a hard year for us.
Oh, that's great. He's feeling good. What's he telling you?
All he said was he's holding on. He's doing a good job and staying out of trouble.
Yeah, he is.
It's been real good.
So, you're running down near the end. All you got to do is just hang on there, huh?
That's all we got to do. Stay out of trouble. It ain't over till it's over.
You got it. Good luck.
Joe's one of those guys I talked about that makes a living maintaining these cars for their owner drivers. Another machine with problems, the 51 car of Russell Newman. He is in the pits. The crew looking it over to see if possibly they can get it back. Oh, there's an adjustment, I believe, to the front suspension or the front wing. And Russell Newman will go back out into this race with only a few laps remaining. And while we were watching the pit action, number 41, Peter Greenfield, continued his charge. He has now moved up to the 4th position. And if there was an award for the outstanding drive of the day, other than one little bobble in the first lap, you'd have to give it to this guy. The way he has battled back has just been incredible. Peter Greenfield all the way up to the 4th spot. His son, of course, Michael Greenfield, qualified on the pole. They had high hopes for that car, but it has been parked back in the pits for some time now, and it's been all up to the elder Greenfield to get the job done today, and he has been more than up to the task.
And Steve, here is problems for the second place car. The number 5 automobile of Chris Clark, spun in the S's, is now trying to get back underway, but it has cost him second place. Paul Dallenbach has moved by him as the man from Florida with Joe Stamola's number 5 car tries to get back underway. The car balks a little bit. Now he's up to speed, but it was a costly error.
And Brock, it looked like he was having a problem getting the car into the right gear, fumbling around with the shifting mechanism. He have a linkage problem, but boy, he is rocketing off now, trying to make up for that mistake.
But I doubt that he can recover. That was a very, very costly error. As we watch this young man, Paul Dallenbach, on his way to perhaps his best finish ever. He is up in the 2nd spot. 3 laps left here at Lime Rock. So really all he's got to do is hold on. Kelvin Fish well out in the lead. No chance to catch him. But Paul, if he doesn't feel any major pressure from the man back in the 3rd spot, that, of course, now is Peter Greenfield. He could be on his way to 2nd.
So much attrition, Brock, in the latter stages of this race, but that's really not very surprising when you consider that, as we said before, they are going a longer distance than they normally do. There is Chris Clark, number 5, with his problem. He is now back to the 5th position. So many of the components on the car have not been tested for this duration before.
Right, and we've had a variety of mechanical ailments. Nothing really constant, no major single problem, but just a lot of little things that have parked a whole bunch of the contenders. As Chris Clark carries on down the hill, heading down the front straightaway, here is your leader, Calvin Fish. 2 laps left. Number 49 from England, on his way to what seems to be a clear-cut victory, provided again the old snake doesn't bite him, and he falls by the wayside. We've seen an awful lot of attrition in the later stages.
Well, Brock, if he gets the checkered flag, and it appears that he will, no one can say that young Mr. Fish backdoored this victory. He has earned it totally and completely. He just dogged Scott Goodyear for lap after lap, finally got the lead and never looked back.
Right, and he did a beautiful move to move into the lead. Got Scott right at the end of the front straightaway, in the middle of traffic, a daring pass, as is the fashion of Formula Atlantic drivers. And here he is on the final lap here at Lime Rock. 100 very difficult miles for him and the rest of this field. As you see one of the flat-bottom drivers signal Fish by, you can see the speed differentials as we discussed earlier. And Fish down the no-name straightaway, clear of all traffic. A whole lot of attrition here now, and has cleared the smoothest racetrack pretty much of any slower traffic.
And here he goes over the climbing turn. It's a little like a roller coaster right there. You can feel your stomach kind of drop away, even when you and I made our lap of the Mercure earlier.
Right, and much faster, though, for Calvin Fish as he heads for the checkered flag down off that slightly off-camber diving turn. Up ahead, the checkered flag waves. Calvin Fish will win it.
An outstanding drive by this professional race car driver from England, and I'm sure in the pit area there's a big smile on the face of Bill O'Connor of Highland Park, Illinois, who owns that car. Well, no one enjoyed the action today here at beautiful Lime Rock Park more than this man, Calvin Fish. Brock is with the winner.
A little victory kiss from Calvin. First of all, congratulations, Calvin.
Thank you.
Once you got by Scott, it was kind of clear sailing.
Yeah, well, we were going together real good, and Scott's car was working well, and I think he was running a bit more wing than I was, so he was a touch quicker through the two quick ones out the back, and then I'd pull him back in down the straight, so it was a good dice, but then I got in front, and then he seemed to drop back all of a sudden. I think he had a right rear flat.
Yeah, his engine was missing, too, and it was probably right around the time that you got by him. But you seemed to be all over him going into one, but you just couldn't nip by him.
Inside line, that's a long race, and I didn't want to do anything silly, you know. He's a real cool customer, Scott, and he was playing the game, and he did a good job, and it was tough getting by him.
Otherwise, so clear sailing. Really no problems after that?
Yeah, the Quaker State Fiore Mariani car was working real well, and everything was good. Goodyear tires worked great, and I'm real happy for the team. The team did a good job, and I'm just real pleased.
Well, congratulations. Excellent work.
Thank you.
Well, that's a cool customer himself. His average speed over 109 miles an hour, and he won it by a whopping 47 seconds, and that is really incredible in this form of racing. Brock's with number 2.
I'm with Paul Dallenbach, who's a member of the youngest member of the great racing family, and this, I understand, is your highest finish in Formula Atlantic. Is that right?
Yes, my best finish was 5th, and now this is 2nd. I can hardly believe it.
Good race all afternoon, though, Paul. You ran steadily. We were watching, and you just kind of moved through the field and took advantage of other people's mistakes and no problems on your own.
That's what we did. You know, we saw that it was a 100-mile race, so we just said, well, let's be consistent. You know, not everybody's going to finish, and we stuck to it. I'd like to thank John Evans and Mark Henry. They did a great job setting up the car.
You did a great job driving it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
And also our congratulations to Paul Dallenbach. Brock, here's how it set up the top 5. Calvin Fish, as you know, won it. Dallenbach, that young man, was 2nd. Peter Greenfield, what a fight he put up to get back into 3rd. John Timken Jr. acquired 4th position, followed by Chris Clark.
Well, I'm with Chris Clark. I talked to Joe for a while during the race, and he was cheering you on, and you had to feel pretty good. It was a good, solid, strong run, and stayed out all the problems that were out there.
Yeah, we were doing real well, and had a good, solid 2nd place going, and unfortunately, I spun myself into 5th, but we'll be there next time. The car handled very well, and my crew did a fantastic job.
Right near the end, were your tires going away on you, or was it just a little brain fade?
Well, I think a combination of slick track and a lot of brain fade.
Well, we're sorry, but on the other hand, it was a super show, and we were rooting for you to run right up there. We understand it's just really an early stage of your career.
Yes, it is. This is my 11th Formula Atlantic race and my 11th race on Slick, so we'll be there.
Sure will. Congratulations, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, here's how 6th through 10th looked in the final results. Eric Lang, Al Mitchell in 7th, Paul Natchway in 8th, a good drive, Russell Newman in 9th, Scott Goodyear, he had to settle for 10th after leading. In the 11th spot, Tommy Gruna, 12th, James Hopperman, 13th, Lewis Baldwin, but he won the flat bottom class, 14th, R. Peter Gates, Steve Shelton in 15th. Brock is with the flat bottom winner.
Steve, I'm with Lewis Baldwin, who really was a class winner here, and a classy guy, I might say, with a run a flat bottom automobile, none of that ground effects, and it's got to be kind of frustrating to watch those guys with those super slick ground effect skirted automobiles zing by you, but you went out in your class.
Yeah, Brock, it was frustrating. They went by you, and you had to watch your mirrors, and I was fighting an oversteer problem all day long, and I just hung in there, and I said, I'm not going to get in trouble with anybody, and it worked out great. And I luckily had some tuition there, and I made it. And it was really fun. I had a great time, and I want to thank Jim Alexander, Goodyear, and my crew, John Slay. They did a great job. Everything hung in. I couldn't be happier.
Well, we're happy for you, too. Congratulations on a well-earned victory.
Great. Appreciate it.
Well, Louis, we had a good time, too. Brock and I always look forward to visiting beautiful Lime Rock Park. And we also always try to escape from the winner's circle before this happens. I wonder if they ever drink any of this stuff. For Brock, I'm Steve Evans. So long.
The executive producer for American Sports Cavalcade is Harvey M. Palish. Produced and directed by John B. Mullen. Promotional consideration provided for and a fee paid by the Style Auto World Championship Team, the nation's premier source of fast lane fashions. Style Auto, the champion's choice for the style of your life. The American Sports Cavalcade is a presentation of Diamond P Sports.